Welcome back to Finding Focus Talks. Today we have Tyler Wierzbicki joining us. Tyler, welcome on.
Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it. Good to be here.
Today we are talking about the topic of finding God through hardships. Very, very relatable topic. I feel like everyone goes through some hardships. I know we have, so it should be a pretty easy conversation to have. But Tyler, as our guest, why does this topic speak to you? What made you choose this topic? And kind of what does it mean to you?
Yeah, so I think the main reason I chose this topic is everyone goes through it, like you said. But I think a lot of my faith or my relationship with God has been drawn from going through hardships. So that's why it means so much to me. That's why Job is my favorite book in the Bible, because I feel like my relationship with God really was strengthened through hard times. So that's the reason why I chose it. And like I said, we all go through tough times, but for me specifically, kind of once I got into college and kind of had to really grow up and take on responsibility, that's when things got busy and I kind of got away from my faith. And that's when I really experienced actual hard times for the first time in my life. So kind of during that time period is when I really kind of on my own, because I grew up in the church, and some of my parents, we all went to church on Sundays. Yeah. I went to middle school and then played video games on the weekend. So, life was sweet. But yeah. So once I was kind of on my own and I got to go to church whenever I wanted to, I got to divide my time in relationships in the ways that I wanted to. I wasn't forced by any parents or anybody above me. Yeah. And those hard times are what made me kind of draw closer to God and realize that He is the, constant in my life and the person that is always there for me. So.
Yeah. It's actually kind of cool because Tyler's the first young adult that we've had, because we've had Mr. Tawny and we've had Mr. Larlin, who are like kind of more midlife and then older, but you're the first young adult outside of college. We've had a few college people on, but like you said, you've kind of went through that process, which honestly I know for us, that's kind of a daunting idea, and hearing how God has gotten you through that is beautiful. Obviously, us being cousins and all, I've grown up with you, but and seen it. But hearing it on a faith level in a conversation like this, it's very revealing. But I'll share a little bit. So if we're talking about hardships and we're talking about finding God through those, this last week was very revealing to me. I went to Momentum Youth Conference. And Tyler was actually one of the people that told me to go because it was very good for him. And so I went into it with this expectation, because everything I heard about was super, super positive. And I went in with this expectation of this is going to be the best week of my life, that this is going to be so much fun, so impactful for me, yada, yada, yada. I get there, first day, I'm like, oh, this is really cool. But it doesn't feel, I don't know, it just felt off. I had some personal stuff going on in my life. With relationships and friendships and all that were just not doing too hot, that were distracting me, right? But I still took my time to pray. I still did all that because I'm there. But it was beautiful. And then after the first few days, I was like, God, what are we doing here? I literally, we had a prayer night, just 2 hours of just straight prayer. And I sat down and I started crying because I was like, God, what are we doing here? I'm supposed to be here to spend time with you, focus on you, have this super impactful, this is supposed to be the best week of my life. And yet it has been kind of the opposite. I was happier at home. So why did you bring me here? What are you doing with me? And why does this hurt so much when this is supposed to be so great? When I'm supposed to be close to you right now and I'm not feeling it, right? And I was looking at the cross, praying this, getting no response, and then eventually the message, the word that was put on my mind was endure. Just hold on for a little longer, endure. I'm like, okay. And that night I get invited onto Momentum's podcast, which was a crazy thing. And then the next day I get invited to go on stage, and then a bunch of crazy stuff happens. And then it ended up being, those last 2 days were probably the best 2 days of my life. They were just so impactful. While I still had the hardships going on, while I still had the things kind of weighing me down going on, but God just was when he said hold on, he meant it. He's like, dude, hold on for a day longer and you're about to see what's going to go on. And that's what I feel like is the story in all of our lives, because God is looking at it from the bird's eye view, right? And then saying, okay, you are here, and I'm sorry, kid, you are suffering so much right now, and there's so much going on. There's an injury going on, but give it some time. Endure for a little bit longer and see what I will do with it. And he's not saying that will go away, but whatever he brings, the reason you're enduring will be so much better, right? And that was really an eye-opening revelation for me.
Yeah, going off the injury part, you guys, I'm going through an injury right now, and when it first happened, I remember texting Nick, and during this time is when I was like probably the most away from God I've been in a while. And I texted him, I'm like, hey, I like really need to talk to you. We went on a walk and we talked about it, and I was telling him I don't think I have time for God. Next like week, I tear my labrum. I'm out for baseball for a while. I have to have surgery. But in that hardship, I found that I have more time for God, and I'm starting to focus on the things that I was focused on before. I was busy with school, baseball, all the other stuff that, sure, it matters, but I was not focused on the one thing I actually needed in my life.
Yeah, another thing too is when I went on my Marriedness Life retreat, of how many people that do go through these hardships and that suffer through them, just talking to a bunch of people in my mixed group from people all over the country, how not only amazing these people are, but the hardships that they went through and how that shaped them as a person. It's just amazing how even though people go through these really tough hardships, it doesn't make them like Debbie Downers, like looking down on life. They all kind of like rose up through it, and through God, they became such amazing people. Everybody on that Marriedness Life retreat was so like joyful and just an amazing people, genuine people. And I think that can be seen through your hardships and through reaching to God to help you get through those hardships.
Yeah, and I you bring up a great point there, and I think we had a discussion as a podcast. We're moving into why Jesus matters to people, right? Why the gospel matters to people, and what it means. And I think the biggest reason why a lot of people end up following Christ is because they've been hurt, and because they've gone through those hardships, and they had no other option than to follow God, right? I remember having this conversation first day of Momentum with my now good friend River, and he talked about how God likes to put us in points of desperation. We get put in points of desperation, not despair, because despair is a lack of hope. There's no hope for me, I'm done for, right? That was Judas, right? And we see what happens there. But desperation is where, Lord, I have no answers. There's no way out. The only way is you. I need a miracle, right? He likes to put us in points of desperation where we have to rely on him, where we're out of baseball, we have to have more time for him, right? So that we have to turn to him, and that we see he brings us back home, right? And I think that's been a beautiful thing, realizing that actually he leads us towards desperation to remind us, like, hey, come home, you know? And doesn't mean we're always going to be in a point of desperation to follow God. Not at all. But sometimes we need that pat in the back to get there, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I like what you said, Ashton. I can relate to that a lot, because I feel like, you know, you work so hard and it's such a frustrating thing to go through. But you look back and it's like, well, say that injury doesn't happen, or say that low time doesn't happen for you. Does your relationship with God grow, or do you just, probably not? You just kind of stay on the path that you were on. That's why this is something that's kind of near and dear to me, because that's the same way that, like, how I was in college, if everything was just smooth and everything went the way that I wanted it to go, then my relationship with God probably would have just became more and more distant, because what would have pushed me to grow closer to him or lean on him. So it sucks that it takes something like that. It takes hardship to grow closer to God sometimes. But for me, that's kind of one of those things that brought me closer, brought me kind of back in my relationship with God. So I think that's a cool experience, and I can relate to that.
Yeah, for sure. I'm a firm believer in everything happens for a reason. You might not understand in the moment why this happens. You might question, why me? But in the long run, you actually probably will see why and like the outcome of it, and you get to see you as a person grow a lot more.
So kind of bouncing off everyone's points, right? So we say when you're following God, you're going to have hardships. That's what kind of the message that we've been getting at, right? So my question to Christians out there, people that call themselves Christians, if following Christ is not a struggle, are you truly following him? Right? I want you to go read all of the New Testament and read what the disciples were going through and the different books where when Paul was in prison and all these different people that were enduring suffering for Christ, right? They were being true Christians. And what did they say? They say, if you're going to follow Christ, then you are going to suffer, right? And so to me, there's a comfort that you can take when you're going through those hardships, when you're suffering. And sometimes it might not always seem like a direct relationship of, oh, I'm suffering for Christ. But it says really any suffering you do is for Christ, right? Because Christ partakes in it. And also he deeply knows our pain because he went through it on the cross. He lived a life. He was betrayed. He was murdered. He was whipped. All these different things, right? He knows that deep-seated pain. And yet he still chooses us, the people that pained him. And so for me, I have to constantly remind myself, okay, it's a good thing. Because I don't know about you guys. Like even David Goggins talks about like 90% of life is suffering. He's like, get used to it. And I'm like, oh, like that is kind of accurate. You know what I mean? Like there is a lot of suffering in life, but you know what? I think it's even Paul or it might be Peter that writes, rejoice in that suffering. You know what I mean? When the fiery the fiery trials come upon you, rejoice in it. How many times when Tyler, like if you were having a hard time and I said rejoice in it, you'd be like, all right, shut up. Like that's so rude of you. But that's how we have to be because it happens so much in our life, right?
Yeah, another thing too is you don't have to shelter all that burden yourself. Like I think what I've noticed recently is praying for other people is so powerful. Like I had a friend who's been going through some family issues, and I've been praying for them, and they started to reach out to me about it, talk to me about it, and it's kind of like starting to like leaning on other people just really helps. So yeah. Not only on other people but God too. Like just always kind of reinforce yourself with him, talk to him, talk to other people too. I mean, it might seem scary at first, but I mean, you're gonna end up probably doing it one way or another. So I suggest just going out there and share with people, I guess.
Yeah, and I think like you said, the power of prayer, excuse me, is important too, because I'm gonna come to you, Braden, and be like, I'm going through this really hard time. Can you give me some advice? Like, how can I get through this? But not often are like, Braden, can you pray for me in this? And I think that's something that needs to be said because that's the most powerful thing you can do for somebody. You can give me good advice or you can help me through hard times, but if you pray for me, that's the best thing that you guys can do for each other.
Yeah. Very sure. Yeah, and like I'm even reminded of my brother Christian. There's a moment when he got really sick at a point in life where he could not get sick. Like you ever have that moment, like that week in life where you're like, okay, this is it, I'm done. Yeah, it's like if I get sick right now, I am completely screwed. That was him. He got sick, and I was on my big Jesus kick, and he just looks at me and goes, "Can you pray for me?" Which for him, like he's like a very funny Christian, all that stuff, but he asked me that, and I went and prayed for him, and I was like, dang, like God got him to that point of desperation. Like he's like, I am so screwed right now. The only way I can be saved is through the power of prayer. Like there's no medication I can take. There's no even I hate to say this, but go into a hospital. Like you were a nurse for a while, and you're still in the medical field. You go and look at some of those people that are dying. Oh my gosh. Like they are in that point of desperation. They're like, I've tried all the medication. I've tried all this. We're still doing it and it's not working. I need a savior. I need something greater to come in and work. And the miracles we've seen that have happened show us, the power of God.
Yeah. And that's why, hardships, they're the worst, but they also, it's like you said, if you go to a hospital where I'm there all the time, and those are the most faithful people that there are, because those are the people who need it the most. And even though that story about Christian is funny, it's just funny how it's human nature to when you're doing okay, and this is me to, a T. When you're doing okay, it's, I'm fine, God, you can go concentrate on somebody else. I'm good. But it's when you start to struggle or you start to need somebody to lean on, that's when the human nature in us is like, God, where are you at? I need you right now. Mm-hmm. I know we haven't really talked in a while, but like, I need your help. And it's like, even if you're not faithful, you see people that are in just brutal situations, they're at a low spot in their life, and they like, well, I don't know, I'm an atheist my whole life, but I just started to pray because I needed somebody. And so it's cool how those hardships kind of really turn us to God, and how that's in our human nature too.
Yeah. When you were talking, it reminded me, I was listening to a Francis Chan sermon not that long ago, and he was talking about when you read it in the Old Testament, when all these different people would create these different idols, right? They like the Tower of Babel, right? They tried to build it, and it was like their own god, and like all these different things. And yeah, the Israelites that fell away, and then they try and come back, and it's like all this mess, and people just like, there was long points of suffering, and then people would try and turn to anything but God, and then God's like, no, what are you doing? Like, this is like, do you not see what I'm laying on the table for you? And for me, in my own life, on a personal note, I can see this through like significant others and like relationships. It's like, sometimes you'll get so deep in a relationship, or you'll be invested in someone, right? And you'll even start to put them above God, right? You're talking to them more. You're not praying as much. Like, they're drawing from you a little bit more, right? Which, because it takes a time commitment, right? But then, like you said, it's like, it's not a like once in the moment. It's not like a banning like this. As soon as the relationship starts, like, that doesn't mean that starts happening. No, but it's over time. It's like they start to build this idol, right? And that's why it's always really good. And that's honestly, when I look in my own life, like, a lot of the friendships or relationships I've had have been removed from me. Mm-hmm. It was like God's like being like, dude, you forget, like, I'm right here. Yeah. I'm supposed to be the main guy. Like, so that's why it's like, okay, now when I get this new friendship, now when I get this new girlfriend, now when I get this, that, whatever, you are still number one. Mm-hmm. Because that's how it's supposed to be, and that's how I want it to be now.
And it's funny, and being a little older, I think that's the biggest thing I've learned is that God is constant. In going through phases of being in high school to being in college, now being out of college. I had 3 best friends in high school who I thought, like, nothing could break our bond. Like, we're just going to be friends for the rest of our life. There's no doubt about it. And we're still friends, but after high school, one moves to Florida, one moves to Colorado, and one moves to Columbus. So the closest one is like 2.5 hours away. And it's like, how did that happen in the span of like a year? And so I think the thing that I've learned through the stages of, and now that I'm in college, and I was close with friends in college, and now not as much anymore, and I've made new friends, it's just funny that through all of it, God is constant. God is the one thing in your life that no matter what, He will be there. You don't know what tomorrow will bring. You don't know what the future holds, but God is constant, who will always be there. And so that's probably the number one thing that, especially in hardships, that, I've learned.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think for me, and I like, honestly, I want to ask you, Tyler, like, don't you get frustrated? Like, isn't it sometimes like frustrating? It's like, you look at this and it's like, it's not what I wanted it to be.
No, for sure. Yeah.
And for me, it's like, I was looking at him like I remember even praying like somewhat recently, like, God, I thought this was supposed to be good. Mm-hmm. I thought this was what you wanted for me. Why did you put this in my life to be a good thing for a little bit and then not anymore? Like, what was why? It feels like you just teased me. Like, what's going on here? You know what I mean? But I want people to know that it's okay to feel like that, and it's okay to voice your frustration, right? Go read the book of Job. Now, but also in chapter 38, you see God respond. Mm-hmm. in that thunderstorm, in that tornado, and be like, where were you when I created the foundations of the earth? Mm-hmm. Like, why? And I don't think God's doing that to just be flex on us and be like, oh, here's how big and powerful I am. It's like, no, dude, like, I know what history is like. I know what's best for you. Let me take care of you, right? And especially with Jesus, right? If you look at our relationship with Jesus, again, we always like we don't deserve him by any means, right? We don't deserve that Savior. We don't deserve to be forgiven of our sins or anything like that, right? But the person of Jesus is there and offers us that, and he even wants us to come to him with those frustrations, which is crazy to me because again, he can see it and he's like, dude, I did all of this for you and it's still not enough, right? And for me, it's like, okay, let me take a step back. Let me take comfort in my relationship with God. And again, if we prioritize that, make that number one, and we take comfort in that, then everything else, there might be little chinks in the armor every once in a while, but we're still gonna be fine. We're still gonna be happy.
Yeah, and then other thing too that kind of works along with that is when you put God first, so many good things start to come from that. Mm-hmm. Like when I first started, like, I mean, I was close with you guys, but at the same time, I mean, sophomore year, I was really falling away. Mm-hmm. But when I came to Christ, I mean, you guys became so close. You guys were like family after that, and that was such a good thing that happened in my life. And it all started from coming to Christ when I was at that 100%, putting God first, praying every day, and all this stuff. And then all those good things started to happen. Like,
yeah. And I think it's also important because, you know, a community got you there, built you, and prepared you for that. But if we're going to be 100% transparent, like, we are not as close as our group isn't as tight as it was when we even started the podcast, right? But has our faith grown? Yes, right? So God can use people to kickstart, right? God can use your youth group, right? But we have to be prepared to still grow and still be with God, right? When that is gone. And like Tyler, I don't know, because you were very involved with youth group growing up. Now that's not there, right? You still have friends from it, but not super close or anything like that. How was that a process of like, okay, I have these group of guys that I've deeply loved, and then it kind of just went boom, you know?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's a life, right? You wish that you could be best friends with those people. Like, I still talk to some of them occasionally, but those were my best friends growing up, and I love those people. But since then, there's a lot of people that are still Christians that you can become friends with. I still do Bible studies. I still, I've made a lot of friends through that. And so although it stinks that life has kind of separated us, I'm still part of a Bible study where I have people that are brothers in Christ that I can talk to and that have my best interests in mind. And, you know, they think with that faith first mindset. So that would be the number one, is just always surrounding yourself with those people. We want outreach to people who are not Christians, of course, but you definitely need that base or foundation of those, at least a few friends that, hey, like, you know, to talk about your spiritual life. And I still have those for sure. And that's a big help. And then, two, I mean, it's again, the God is constant thing. He's always going to be there. And, you know, I think there's some times where, like we talked about earlier, there's frustration where it's like, man, how do my best friends all move away and I'm still here? And like, we're best friends and now I can't even see them. I haven't seen them in, you know, years. And why does that have to happen? Mm-hmm. But again, I think you look, it's one of those things where you look back and it's like, okay, now I see why freshman year of college I had to go through that hardship, or, you know, why that happened. And it's like you said, Ashton, everything happens for a reason. And I think it's funny, and sometimes it takes a long time. Sometimes it's like your momentum week is the next week where you look back and you're like, oh, well, that makes sense. Okay. And so it's cool. I think, you know, when you have that full circle moment, you look back, you're like, well, that was an unfortunate thing that happened, but that ended up being great for me. Or I understand why God, you know, why he did that for me. He always has a plan. Everything does happen for a reason. So, and trusting in that, I think, is probably the faith portion of it is a big aspect of it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think for me, like what you just said, because, you know, those people that you thought you'd be best friends with, but then the Lord provides in a different way. He provides these new people that you grow closer to, and the beautiful fruits come from that, right? But also, I know in my own life, because, you know, best way for me to talk about something is to be able to relate to it. In my own life, sometimes God will bring beautiful things into my life, beautiful fruits into my life, but because of my mindset and my expectation and my trying to be my own God, really, I don't realize the beauty in those, right? When I get the, if we took your scenario and say you responded how I probably would have. Okay, I got these new people, but they're not as good as my old. You know what I mean? Like, or like, okay, I finally got this new friend, but I still miss that old one.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? And so for me, it's like, I've been struggling with this recently, but I feel like the Lord's been working on it for me of just disattaching and living with what he gives me every single day, right? Because so often we set expectations and expectations off of what God does for us, because of the character he is, the constant character he is. But I think that can be a detriment sometimes when he finally gives us something new.
Going off the expectations part, a lot of times you have expectations of what you want in the moment. Say like you want that person in your life, like you think that's 100% going to be my wife.
Yeah.
Turns out wasn't the best situation for you.
Yeah.
And it just wasn't a part of the plan, and you sometimes just got to accept the fact that it wasn't a part of your plan. And that's a part of the expectations that I've grown to know as a person throughout the summer, was that I thought I wanted this, but in reality it just wasn't part of the plan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's just sometimes you gotta separate those wants from the needs.
Exactly.
So going back to just when we think about the general topic of finding God through hardships, and anyone can go first, but when you're going through that hardship, what's that first thing you turn to get back to God? Is it going and praying by yourself or that community, or is it, a video or something? Like, what is the thing that reconnects you? You're like, okay, like now I'm back. You know what I mean? Like I'm coming back here.
I guess I can go first. For me, it's like, I'd probably say adoration. Adoration is something where I feel like it puts me in that environment. I know I'm going to be 100% locked in, and that I'm really going to focus on what I need to talk to the Lord about. And then between the music and then the silence, where that silence hits you and you're really deep in your thoughts and you're really in a good conversation with God, I feel like that's, for me, best when I can start to turn back, because it's not only such powerful and like changing you, but emotionally, I feel like it's really uplifting as well and helps you get back on the right track.
I would say mine is nature, just going on walks and then journaling my thoughts mainly. My big thing recently is just journaling my prayers, so I remember what I'm thinking in that day, because I have pretty bad memory. But I just love journaling my thoughts, and it lets me get out my full like creativity and stuff like that.
Yeah, for me, mine's communication. Even anyone who I'm friends with or good friends with, that's my main source of like growing close with somebody, is just sitting down and talking to them. And so I'm the same way with my relationship with God. With my job, a lot of my job is I drive, and so it's a lot of traveling within the Northeast Ohio area. So I'll get in my car, and before I even turn on any music or turn on anything I want to listen to, I go to prayer. And it's funny because sometimes, especially when I have a lot to talk about or a lot that's on my chest, I'll start driving, start praying, and 25 minutes later, I'm not done with my prayer, but we're at the hospital, and I'm like, well, and I think for me, communication, and just like sometimes just just like you would to, a best friend or somebody that you're close with, you're just talking, through what you're going through, or, what you're feeling, or, your confusion or hardships. And again, to relate back to Job, I mean, that's how he got through his hardship. He just, he mourned in silence and just leaned on God, and just, through faith and prayer, he had confidence that he was going to come through. So,
yeah. I think okay. So earlier on, we were talking about sometimes you have to kind of get through it, and then you can look back and see what happens, right? In Romans, it says, therefore, since since we have been justified through faith, we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ, through whom we have gained access by faith into this grace in which we now stand. And we not boast in the hope of the glory of God. Not only so, but we also glory in our sufferings, because we know that sufferings produces perseverance, perseverance produces character, and character produces hope. And hope does not put us to shame, because God's love has poured out into our hearts through the Holy Spirit, which has been given to us. So in Romans, it's talking about the progression, right? Of like that those hardships bring something, right? It creates something, and then that thing creates another thing, and then that thing creates another thing, right? And if you look even at the creation of this podcast, and we could dive deep into your story and your story, but I know from my own personal story, if that last summer, honestly, it was around this time, that if I was not going through a breakup and going through these hard times and praying to God and being like, Lord, use this hardship for something so much greater. Lord, I put it into your hands, that I trust in you, like Job. I trust in you that what I'm going through right now is worth it. And then it really sucked for a long time. And then 4 months later, I get asked to do a witness. Next thing you know, we're on the podcast. Now we're talking about stuff. And now I'm able to share that experience. And none of that happens without God removing that and creating this heartbreak in my life. And if that, honestly, if like say it didn't hurt so much, or it wasn't so impactful, then it might not have got to the extent that it was supposed to. So God sets everything up, and it'd be interesting to know how much God hurts for us when he knows he has to, right? But again, he's like, hold on, kid, because look what has happened. And again, if it'd be, I wish in that moment I could see like how God sees and be like, okay, this, okay, I'm in. Like, you know what I mean? But it wouldn't. We're supposed to go through that, and I think I feel like everyone can look back at one of those moments in their life and be like, okay, if that hard thing didn't happen, I wouldn't be the person I am today.
Yeah. Another big thing too is like what you were saying, just reflect back and just look back at things. Like before you're about to go into prayer, just reflect, be like, what am I doing wrong in life? What do I need to fix? And then pray to God about it. Like, have a conversation with him about the things you need to fix, or kind of like what's going on in your life. Just, yeah, talk to him.
In prayer also, the thing I've been adding is making God greater than me. No matter what, I always start off with something glorifying him and making me seem less than him, because truly he is so great and powerful.
John 3:30. But I think, like, Tyler, is there, if you don't mind sharing, is there a moment or a thing that you look back on in life that when you look at it, you're like, man, that really, really sucked, but it is necessary for who I am today and necessary for my more importantly, necessary for my relationship with God?
Yeah, I don't know if there's like one specific moment. I don't think there was like a moment where I was like, yep, that was it. For me, it was kind of more of a snowball effect, I guess. And it really just started, I mean, probably a year into college when it kind of hit me like, okay, I haven't seen my best friends from high school in a year, and was way too busy. I overbooked myself, and I was a cross country and track runner all throughout middle school, high school, and around college, and then ended up having a heart issue, and now I wasn't able to run anymore. So that was terrible. And then obviously my friends moving away. And then honestly, I'm going into my senior year. I was going into my last year of college, getting ready to graduate, and I ended up changing my major. And so that was probably the point where it's like, okay, all this happened. And I kind of lean in this, like, where the God is constant thing is so, like, it's so important to my life, because I leaned on that school and my future. I was like, well, okay, it's, these friends, we're not, super close anymore, but it's okay, because like I'm in school and I'm about to graduate. And then all of a sudden now that changes, and I have no idea what that looks like. And so that at that moment I was like, okay, this is like this is the worst thing that's ever happened to me. Like usually I'm used to just being in control and things going my way. And so it was at that point where I was like, well, I'm obviously not in control because this is not working out for me. And that's when I really turned and I'm like, well, I don't really have, I'm out of options. Like this is, I've done everything I can. And so that's when I still was going to church and I still, I was still Christian. I never stopped believing, but I didn't lean on him like I should have because I was doing fine. I was just doing it on my own. And so that's when I turned and I started it's all about the intention. I started going to church, looking to build on my relationship. I started going to Bible studies and making friends with people who were Christians and have gone through similar things. And now, whatever it is, however long later, I look back and I'm like, that ended up being great because now I'm in a position that I never thought I would be. I love what I do, and it's so much better than what I was doing. And I'm closer. My faith is the strongest it's ever been. So it's like, it's like you said, you wish you knew when you were going through it, like, hey, there will be better days, but it's if you stay faithful and like Job, like we keep referencing, you just know that God is there for you and that he loves you more than anyone on this planet. I think that's the number one thing you got to keep in mind when you're going through those hard times. So
yeah. I think we get into kind of a place of complacency, right? Because like you said, you've been Christian your whole life, growing up going to church, and you're still doing it, still being a quote unquote good Christian, but it took that thing to push you to be a better one, to grow, to really dive deeper into it. And not saying that what you were doing before wasn't good enough, because that's not a salvation issue, that's not anything like that. But God was like, okay, he needs to be prepared for what is about to happen, right? And I think that's the cool thing is when we get complacent, I think the Lord is preparing us. I don't think it's even taking a polar opposite view here of maybe God isn't putting us through this hardship. Maybe he's getting us ready for the hardship or the future hardship, right? And I think that's a really interesting perspective to take because, there's Bible verses that say the Lord prepares us, right? Mm-hmm. And we're so quick to be okay, Lord, I'll do this, I'm if you're with me, I'll do this. But why'd you do this to me? And it's well, I'm just preparing you. So I like to think of it that way because, God is loving and has good character. And I don't want to make it seem like through this conversation that God is tearing our lives down to bring us back to him. You know what I mean? Because that's not the Father who he is. But partially, there's some aspect of that, of course. But another thing momentum revealed to me, and I think we can all relate to this, there's someone in your life that that is suffering more than you. And that and even you can do the hypothetical of the person across the world in a different country that doesn't have anything, or the person that just accepted Christ in a country where it's not accepted, and the trials that they're going through because of that, right? So it's also, that's another Job moment for me of God being dude, you're complaining about your hardship, come on, these my children are suffering over here, and you're caught up in your own selfish problems. Here, I'm here to help you. Well, but you also help your brothers and sisters, right? And that was big for me at Momentum. Is I was blessed to hear all these people's different stories of the different pain and suffering that they've had in their life. And the reason I love that we're doing this topic is because that's how they turned to Christ, right? They got in that point of desperation of, all right, my mom's dead. My dad left me. I was raped. I had something tragic happen in my life. And me over here, I'm complaining, God, why did you remove this friend from my life? You know what I mean?
Exactly.
It's okay. But again, not to say anyone's suffering isn't suffering. Of course, your own problems have validity to them. But the point is, everyone has their own. Everyone is to help and each other's, because we know we can all relate to it, and we can all help with it through the power of Christ, right? And I think that's where when we have to turn to Jesus, because again, for me, I've lived a very privileged life. I talk about all this suffering, whatever, and it ain't that bad. I am very happy with my life. And when you have someone come up to you and be like, yeah, I was depressed. My best friend killed themselves. My mom died. All these different things. I'm like, okay, I have no clue how to respond to that. You know what I mean? Like, I'm like literally praying, like, Lord, please help me say what they need to hear, because they deserve it, right? They deserve to hear what God needs them to hear. But again, for me, it creates a dependency on God, because it's so critical to help our brothers and sisters. So Ashton, you work at a nursing home, correct?
Correct.
How is that? Because I know I've heard some stories from other people that it's hard working in an environment like that where there is sometimes a lack of hope, right?
Yes and no. So, part of it is where you see the dementia part, or Alzheimer's, and it's like I've been working there for almost 2 years now, and the part that is like very sad to me is where you see a resident that you used to like be very close with, like you'd be able to have talks with, and now they don't even know how to eat their food. It's awful. And then the cool thing, or I wouldn't say cool about it, but the thing that is inspiring to me is that they're always at church. There's like a little chapel there, and they all go into chapel, and then next thing you know, there's a huge rush after they leave chapel to go eat, because that's what they get to look forward to. So that's the cool part. And I have a few residents that know about the podcast and etc., and they ask me about it, and they have ideas and stuff like that. So it's really cool to see that part.
That is really cool.
It'd be tough for the one side, but then also there's a beauty to it. I think,
Dear friends, do not be surprised at the fiery ordeal that has come on you to test you, as though something strange were happening to you. But rejoice inasmuch as you participate in the sufferings of Christ, so that you may be overjoyed when his glory is revealed.
so that was what I was talking about earlier, of like, if I told you to like rejoice in your suffering, you'd be like, all right, dude, like that's kind of insensitive. But when you get further into that verse, I've always focused on the first part because it's so insane to me to say rejoice in suffering. But when you get further into it, the participating in sufferings of Christ, so that you are overjoyed when his glory is revealed. Like, what does that even mean? So when you're saying I suffer, and when I suffer, it's with Christ, and that in those sufferings, it reveals his glory to me. Like, how does that even work, right? But going back to earlier in our conversation, when we go through those sufferings, we go through those times when Jesus had his, Lord, take this cup from me, and he goes through it, right? And then he's in heaven, and all these beautiful things, and now we have 2 billion Christians in the world. It's like, now his glory is revealed. The glory of God is revealed in our lives through our sufferings. And so when you dive deeper into that verse, it's like, okay, that makes sense.
The thing I took for that really just stood out to me was it said, do not be surprised.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, it's going to happen no matter what. You're going to go through these trials. So I thought how that was that's what stuck out to me from the verse.
Yeah.
So I know you like that's your favorite book of Job is your favorite. Why is that?
I think just because, kind of like what I shared earlier, I think not that my circumstances were anywhere close to Job's, but that is the book when I was going through it that I leaned on the most, and kind of learning about kind of how he dealt with his trials. I mean, if somebody told you that all your kids were dead and you lost everything you had within a short time span, that would be pretty tragic, and that's about as tragic as it gets. And so I think it was really cool for me to go through a hard time, which again, not nearly, it's kind of sad when you compare the two, but it's cool to be able to just open a book that is thousands of years old and find a story or an example of a man who went through a tragic time or hardship and responded in a faithful way or a way that pleased God, and he got through it. And being able to learn and read from and learn from that is, I think, that's fascinating. And so seeing how he went through hardship, leaned on God, and got through it, that was, especially at the time, motivation and it's inspiration for me. Something that I could look at and be like, okay, that's how I need to attack this, or that's the mindset I need to have when I'm going through this hardship, is keep God first and never let go of the hope or the faith that that you talked about. So that's why I love it, is just because I think it's so relatable to me. It's something that I lean on, and something, it's not the last hardship. I go through hardships all the time, week to week and month to month, and it's something I go back to, all the time. So
I got another question for you. So when you were going through those hardships, are there any things other than prayer that you did, or when you felt like prayer wasn't enough to get through it, was there anything else that you did?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because I always felt like it's like you can be as faithful as you can be the most faithful person there is, but the thing that's tough about it is God isn't here in the flesh physically again. God isn't sitting right next to you. Like, there's plenty of times or days where I was like, man, I wish that there was just somebody here, that he was here, that I could just like talk to him. But it's just when you're sitting down, and staring at a wall, it's like, this is, it's tough. And I think that a lot of it is kind of the friend group that you guys have. And even though, we are all humans and we all struggle and we all, have sinful nature within us, I think leaning on people that have that faith or have Christ at the center of their lives is important, because they can give you that Christian perspective or, advice, or they can give you the clear, like they have a clear vision or 20/20 vision of what things look like, and you're, down in the dumps, or you just want it to be done with. And so I think leaning on the people around you, and I think that's where building friendships with people that have Christ at their center of life is important. In the classic story in the Bible where the house on the sand versus the house on the rocks, and I think that's kind of what I'm referring to, is if you have friends that aren't centered in Christ, their advice is going to be a lot different than what a Christian friend might be. It might it might tell you, hey, look, that really sucks that happened, but we got a party that we're going to this weekend, you should just come hang out with us and forget about it, versus like, hey, like, I'm here for you, like, come over, we'll talk about it, you can stay the night, you could come to church with our family. So I think leaning on the friendships and the connections you made through church or through the podcast, I think that would be my advice, and something that I did. Again, that Bible study I went to was huge for me, because I was talking to people who went through hardships and dealt with similar things and dealt with it in a Christian way, which was helpful for me.
Yeah.
Let's talk about, so you guys are all athletes, right?
Yeah.
Let's talk about, obviously, I was an athlete in high school and college, and especially if you're committed and you work hard, again, it's not life-ending or life-altering, but it's really frustrating. I used to get so frustrated when I'd work all summer, work towards a goal, and then just game day or whatever would come up short. When you guys, what is your guys' plan of attack, or how do you guys deal with shortcomings when it comes to athletics or just anything in general that you're preparing hard for?
I would say freshman year was really bad for me, because I was so worried about getting to that next level, getting on varsity, all that stuff. Sophomore year, I'm on varsity, whatever. And that's where my faith took the next step, where I would pray before every game. So I wasn't worried about the outcome, because no matter what, I was going to come home to a family, all that stuff. And that was what changed me as a player. And to be honest, I progressed a lot better that way, instead of just worrying and like overthinking every single outcome.
Yeah. For me, it was just, keep the grind going. But I mean, sophomore year, I really wasn't in my faith yet, and it was one of the most miserable seasons of my life. I mean, I did really well at the end of the year. I ended up getting 7th at the state tournament, but I was cutting so much weight. I felt really down all the time. I was just not having a good time. Then junior year, I was probably having my best season ever, and then I was getting really prideful and almost getting away from God again, and then bang, I broke my hand and basically missed the end of my season. Watching all my teammates and even people I beat place at the state tournament, it's like, man, but I guess it's the grind. I mean, no matter what you're doing, I mean, you got to keep going, whether that's faith, sports, just keep going at it. I mean, thing after thing, practice after practice, prayer after prayer. I mean, just keep going.
I feel
Got something.
I feel ridiculous. Well, no, I feel ridiculous talking about golf, but like,
Golf's so frustrating.
yeah, I've for anyone that knows about my golf, I've shot. My average since freshman year has actually gotten worse. So, so somehow I've gotten worse the more I practiced, and so this year where I stopped caring for it as much, stopped trying as hard, and now I'm doing way better. So, for me, it's like, I think in those moments, I still loved it while I was working. I wasn't working hard to shoot a good score. I wasn't working hard to doing that. I was working hard to work hard, because I believed that it would eventually lead to that. But I also fell in love with the process, because again, if I was just the same way in my faith, if I was just reliant on results, I would be disappointed all the time. I'd be in a terrible place. But if I fall in love with the process of it, if I fall in love with my daily life with God, man, that's such a fulfilling life. Not saying that there weren't moments where I'm like, all right, I've practiced so much more than everyone else on this team, and I've gotten worse. How does that even happen?
Yeah.
But not saying it doesn't. I'm still always going to fall back a little bit, still be disappointed in the result. But not being fully reliant on it is a big thing for me. But
Yeah, and I like what you were saying, Braden. I think it can apply to everything in faith. There's gonna be, not everything is just gonna be up and on. Like, it's not gonna all be just rainbows and sunshine the whole way. And so that there's gonna be times where days that suck, or things that just didn't go the way that you wanted to. But I think find a way where, when those things happen, like, how do you get up the next morning and you say, like, you know what, I'm still gonna grind. And it's the same thing. It's the same thing in sports, and the same thing in faith, and same thing in just life in general. It's like, how do you, like, you have a performance, or I would have a race on Saturday. Like, no matter how it goes, how do I make sure that on Sunday morning I'm getting up to get another run in, or how do I, I'm getting up to go to church, like, no matter what. And I think that's finding a way, whatever that is for the individual. I think that's the important, is the consistency and the constant nature of it.
Yeah. Another thing is, too, I found what you were saying kind of interesting, because I almost went through the same thing where you feel like you're grinding, but you're not getting any better.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the main thing that helped me fix that was to stop overthinking and just kind of do it. Like, if you're in your faith and questioning things is good. Like, asking questions is good. But if you're kind of like wiggling back and forth between things, just do it.
Yeah.
Like, dive into it. Like, I was overthinking about what shot I should take. How do I set it up? But when I went out there and just did it, and I believed in myself, that's when I took huge leaps forward. So if you kind of believe in yourself, believe in God, more importantly, that He can help you get through what you need to get through, and to keep succeeding in life and through your faith, I think that's really important. Just to almost like turning your brain off and just be like, all right, this makes sense. I'm confident in this, and I know I can do this, and just go and do it.
That's good. Going back to what you were talking about, I really love your point, because it makes me think you really see the validity of your faith, where you are at in your faith, when you have to get surgery, when your girlfriend breaks up with you, when when your family's taken away, when your mom dies, when that traumatic experience happens, right? And you wake up the next day and you still believe that there's a good God that loves you. You know how hard that is? Like, I don't know how hard that is, because I haven't had to truly experience that. Like, the worst is, like, maybe my girlfriend broke up with me, right? Like, that, oh my gosh, But when, that super deep, painful experience happens that wrecks you. You can't eat, you can't sleep, you can't even just go without thinking about it, right? And you still turn to God and say, God, you were great. God, you were loving. Like, I still want to love you. Like, that's when you see the validity of your faith, because man, that is such a hard thing to do. I still struggle with all the time, and I think every Christian struggles with a little bit. Even Job struggled with. But you always end up going back to, right? And I think that's a very interesting. Such a hard thing to do.
Yeah. Kind of going off of what both you said about that is, do you guys ever go through, like, when you lose a game or a match or a race, or like you really want to get back into it the next day? Like, you're so mad about losing that you really want to get into it. I feel like it's almost the same way in faith. Like, kind of when I feel like when we really get back into our faith is kind of when we're at that lowest point, or we're at that loss, so to speak.
Yeah.
It's like just a parallel between that. I think is kind of cool, like you guys were talking about.
Yeah. I had my thought come back to me.
That's good.
So we were talking about like when you know that we're recognizing that there's deep pain and suffering in other people's lives that we can't even begin to understand, right? And how in our lives, you were talking about how I kind of just wish sometimes God was just there, like even to just give me a hug, you know what I mean? Like sometimes I just need that person, right? That is why we're called to be disciples. That's why we're called to be many Christs, right? We're supposed to be Christians, right? And we're supposed to go out and be brothers and sisters. And if we are all doing our job there, then that will happen, right? And not saying, and so that's why it's so important for next time that you see that person having a bad day, go up, give them a hug. Like, you know, like I always think about it this way. Some of my happiest moments, like when you look back and reflect on your day and something super random happened that day where that person complimented you or, you know, came up to you and gave you a high five or whatever, just some complete stranger, right? Those are some of my favorite moments, like, of the day, you know what I mean? And I'm just like, wow, that was really kind of cool, right? And so for me, as a Christian, you see someone on the street, they're having a hard day, like, maybe go talk to them, you know what I mean? Like, I look at what Bryce Crawford's doing. Like, that dude is being a true Christian, right? And so I think it's a call on us, if we really care about this deep suffering that others are going through, let's go help others, right? Not saying that's easy. Obviously, you get in your head and you're like, okay, I don't really know this person. Pray on it. You know, God will give you the strength there. But that's what also God has put in my heart, especially since Momentum, because like, wow, there's just, everyone has a different story. Everyone has that deep hurt, and everyone needs that hug sometimes. You know what I mean?
For sure.
Okay, wait, no. All right, never mind.
Well, I think that's why this, what you guys are doing with this podcast is so great, because I think it tears down that like wall of like the uncomfortableness or awkwardness of like if talking about your faith or talking about hardships that you're going through. When I was in high school, I had a lot of close friends, specifically the three that I've already talked about. But we wouldn't talk about thoughts or feelings because that was soft and you'd get made fun of for that. So I think it's cool that you guys, and that's why when you asked me earlier, like what other than reading the Bible or praying did you do? I think that's a necessary thing to have in your life, is Christian friends that you can talk to those things through those things about, because you can praying to God is the number one thing you can do, but being able to have somebody that you can talk to about it and have a conversation with is important. So that's why, I love what you guys are doing with the podcast. And I think it allows people to feel comfortable, even when you're on Momentum. All those people, they're not going to do that just if you're just sitting in the coffee shop and they don't know who you are, but they know that you do a podcast and they know that you struggle yourself and you guys talk about your own struggles. Allows them that opens the door for them to come and sit, talk to you guys about the same thing, and for you guys to shed Christian light on them, and hopefully they can do the same, with you. So I think that's awesome.
Thank you. Yeah. Kind of going off of that, in James it talks about confessing your sin to each other, right? And that was a little bit of a big theme at Momentum, and like you said, tearing down those walls. It's like, okay, I believe in God, believe in Jesus, believe all these different things, but I'm gonna keep that sin. Oh, I can't tell my cousin Tyler about this sin. I can't tell, Ashton about this sin. I can't tell, whatever, right? And I think that's where we draw these lines. So it's like, okay, I'll go this far, but not all the way. But literally in James, it talks about like the necessity, like share your sins with your brothers and sisters, like you said, the importance of community, right? So when we talk about hardships, when we talk about that, like hardships can be, you know what? Like there have been many times in my life that my hardship at that time is my sin, right? And because I don't want to be viewed as soft or whatever, I keep that in, right? And so breaking down that wall, sharing with others, finding that person, finding the group of people is so critical. And you can see it through your life, through growing up and now and everything. We can see it through our life right now. And also we can see the lack of it we can see what happens in our lives when there is the lack of it. You know what I mean? But I got a question for you.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Tyler,
Let's hear it.
if you were to tell anyone out there, Christian or not Christian, when they're going through a hardship, what is your advice to them?
I mean, that's it's kind of two different categories there. I mean, if I was to talk to a non-Christian who's going through a hard time, again, I think not being afraid, kind of what we just talked about, not being afraid to open up to somebody and talk to them about what you're going through, especially people that have your best interest in mind and that have maybe been around for a while. I think that's, they're rooting for you and they want to see you succeed. Family, friends that that they want the best for you. And that's something that's probably one of my biggest struggles is because it's rooted in me not to talk about these things. And I still do that. I just don't, it's emotions, that's not a thing. I don't, talking about our feelings, that's not a thing. I think the second, like we just talked about, the second that you do that, it, like we said, it tears down that wall. And maybe, you've been wanting to say something for a long time, but you're I don't want that guy to think that I'm weird or that I'm soft. But the moment that he comes to you and says, hey, Nicholas, I just gotta be honest, I've been struggling with this, and now you feel oh my gosh, I can tell him everything that I've been going through. And so, and the same advice for a Christian, but with the added element of that the God is constant and that he's I always viewed my relationship with God as he's my my best friend, and so doing the same thing with God, he's there. And it's really fascinating to me that the creator of the universe will send hardship your way because he wants your attention. That to me has always been a fascinating thing. Why do you want me to talk to you so bad or love you back so bad? But that's also remarkable. And so I think leaning into that, the creator of the universe wants to be close to you, wants to spend eternity with you. So he definitely has your best interest in mind. So leaning into that when you're going through hardships, those would be, the people around you and into, the Heavenly Father for sure.
Yeah. Anything else? I don't know if I'm going to keep this in, but I have one thought that I thought in the shower. I don't know if it was this morning or yesterday, but kind of it reminded me of what you were saying. In the Bible, God says that regardless of you, my name, regardless of your church, regardless of whatever, my name will be great among the nations. It will happen, regardless of you, right? So, stress is off me. I don't have to do anything, right? But, so God doesn't need me. I am not a necessity for heaven or for the future of the universe or anything, or the future of his church or anything like that. To me, that's a relief, because if he needed me, and if I was, oh my gosh, we are a mess. We are screwed. But he deeply, deeply wants you. And that's the cool thing of he doesn't need me. He wants me, and he wants me so badly that he tries to get my attention. And like you said, and it's just, that is a crazy thing to me because, I do the same thing in my life with people. Some of my closest people, I don't need them, but I desperately want them. So I will do things, I will set things up so they come and visit me, right? And talk to me. And and sometimes they're not always the best things. So, but just to be 100% transparent. But yeah. So, all right. Well, that was the main conversation. Tyler, do you want to give us one big clap to end it?
One big clap.
Yeah.
Just clap my hands.
Yeah, just clap your hands.